Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali. In this edition, the Dover Thrift edition, we have an introduction by W.B. Yeats. Yeats has so much positive stuff to say about Gitanjali and about Tagore's poetry in general. I've read a short play by Tagore before that I really, really liked. I think it would be hard to overstate the significance of Tagore to modern Indian literature. I didn't really like Gitanjali. It didn't do anything for me. I get it. I didn't really like reading it. So what is Gitanjali? It's a series of prose poems that work through these sort of devotional issues, these questions about the speaker's relationship to the divine, whether that's sort of the divine in general or a specific divine figure, whatever it is. And they work through these questions of spirituality and how the speaker squares their spirituality and their devotion to this deity with their existence in the world. And some of the speakers in these poems seem to be male, some seem to be female, many are indeterminate. That's why I say there. That's why I use the gender-neutral pronoun. I'll read you some of these. And you'll start to get a sense of this, of the kinds of things that Tagore is working through. So this is, I'll read you the first two here. So this is number one. Thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. This frail vessel thou emptiest again and again, and fillest it ever with the fresh life. This little flute of a reed thou hast carried over hills and dales, and hath breathed through its melodies eternally new. At the immortal touch of thy hands my little heart loses its limits in joy, and gives birth to utterance ineffable. Thy infinite gifts come to me only on these very small hands of mine. Ages pass, and still thou pourest, and still there is room to fill. So, I mean, one of the things that we're getting here is the sort of paradoxical nature of a lot of theology of South Asia, right? Of Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., etc. These sort of notions of the simultaneity of singularity and multiplicity, the simultaneity of being filled and empty, these kinds of things very much align with the sort of cosmological approach that underlies a lot of South Asian religion and philosophy. But we also get this devotion, this submission to the deity, right? And that, of course, is very much sort of associated with Islam, which is one of the other major religious traditions in India. And I don't know that Tagore had much to do with Islam necessarily. He was not Muslim. My understanding is that he, through his father, was part of a sort of reforming sect of Hinduism, but I don't know that much about him, about his life. But you get these sort of blends of different mystical attributes of the divine. Here's the second poem. When thou commandest me to sing, it seems that my heart would break with pride, and I look to thy face and tears come to my eyes. All that is harsh and dissonant in my life melts into one sweet harmony, and my adoration spreads wings like a glad bird on its flight across the sea. I know thou takest pleasure in my singing. I know that only as a singer I come before thy presence. I touch to the edge of the far-spreading wing of my song thy feet which I could never aspire to reach. Drunk with the joy of singing, I forget myself and call thee friend who art my Lord. So again, this sort of mixed personal and impersonal relationship with the deity, right? This sense of personal connection to the divine, but mediated by the relationships of authority, mediated by this sort of giving and taking attitude, the distance between the speaker of the poem and the deity who is being addressed, and yet that distance is bridged in some senses. So we have a very, again, complicated version of spirituality here, as Tagore works through these different ideas. But it's not always about the connection with the deity. It's also about the place of the poet persona in the world. And we see that, for instance, with this next one I'm going to read you, which is poem 17, which is still focused on the nature of the relationship with the deity, but also puts that into a worldly context in which the speaker engages with other people. So this is poem 17. I am only waiting for love to give myself up at last into his hands. That is why I am so late and why I have been guilty of such omissions. They come with their laws and their codes to bind me fast, but I evade them ever, for I am only waiting for love to give myself up at last into his hands. People blame me and call me heedless. I doubt not they are right in their blame. The market day is over and work is all done for the busy. Those who came to call me in vain have gone back in anger. I am only waiting for love to give myself up at last into his hands. And so this idea of, I think there's a Christian phrase that comes, I want to say, from St. Paul, to be in the world but not of it. Here we're kind of going beyond that. Tagore kind of goes beyond that. The poet persona goes beyond that, right? This idea of being in the world in only the vaguest sense, only in the sense of physically existing in the world, but not actually engaged in the world, to ignore earthly responsibilities, earthly authority, etc., etc. We get this in several of the poems. But the last one I'm going to read to you is poem 51. And this gives us a very different sense of that spiritual relationship between the speaker and the divine. Because in this one, in much of Gitanjali, the poet persona is waiting, devoted to the divine, right? Is waiting for this deity to arrive, and is just absolutely focused on that. But in some poems, that's not the case. And 51 is one of those instances where things almost go badly because the poet persona and those around them are not prepared for the arrival of the divine, or the arrival of the king in this case. So this is poem 51. The night darkened. Our day's works had been done. We thought that the last guest had arrived for the night, and the doors in the village were all shut. Only some said the king was to come. We laughed and said, no, it cannot be. It seemed there were knocks at the door, and we said it was nothing but the wind. We put out the lamps and lay down to sleep. Only some said, it is the messenger. We laughed and said, no, it must be the wind. There came a sound in the dead of the night. We sleepily thought it was the distant thunder. The earth shook, the walls rocked, and it troubled us in our sleep. Only some said it was the sound of wheels. We said in a drowsy murmur, no, it must be the rumbling of clouds. The night was still dark when the drum sounded. The voice came, wake up, delay not. We pressed our hands on our hearts and shuddered with fear. Some said, lo, there's the king's flag. We stood up on our feet and cried, there is no time for delay. The king has come, but where are lights, where are wreaths, where's the throne to seat him? Oh shame, oh utter shame, where's the hall, the decorations? Someone has said, vain is this cry, greet him with empty hands, lead him into thy rooms all bare. Open the doors, let the conch shells be sounded. In the depth of the night has come the king of our dark, dreary house. The thunder roars in the sky, the darkness shudders with lightning. Bring out thy tattered piece of mat and spread it in the courtyard. With the storm has come of a sudden our king of the fearful night. And so again, I think we've got this sort of, what we see across these poems and across the collection as a whole is this really diverse set of engagements with spirituality, connections with the divine, meditations on what it means to be a human being in a world where the divine exists, etc., etc.